It's true that you are hearing the notes. But you are also hearing the spaces between the notes. Let's explore these spaces with your hosts, Jeremy Burns and Matthew Scott Phillips.
Hello, Jeremy.
Hey, Matt, what's up, buddy?
Not a whole lot. Just hanging out. Thought we might talk about intervals today.
Intervals are fun. Intervals are great.
Yeah, but they can also be a little complicated. And so we'll spend today talking about the theory of intervals, and then later we'll talk about how to actually hear them in music in our ear training segment. But for now, I think we should just sort of try to help you understand what an interval is when you're hearing one or seeing one on a score. Intervals are defined as the distance between two notes, and that's an important definition. It's important to always be trying to think of intervals in that way. Whatever else we're saying about it, fundamentally, when we're talking about an interval, we're talking about some kind of distance along the chromatic scale between one note and the next. So whether we're talking about this kind of a distance or that kind of a distance, we're still talking about distance, and those are all still some interval. So when we think about the intervals, the way we name them in theory class, major second, minor third, perfect fifth, whatever, we're talking about them having fundamentally two components. One is the number, right? You know, a third, a fourth, a fifth, a ninth. The other is quality, major, minor, perfect, diminished, or augmented. We've heard these words before.
We have.
Yeah,
have we?
Have we yet? Number is easy. Number is just the number of notes in between the lowest note and the highest note. So if I wanted to find the interval from D to G, I have between those two notes, D, which we'll call 1, and then there is an E, and there is an F, and there is a G, which is 4. So D is 1, E is 2, F is 3, G is 4. So the distance from D to G is a fourth.
So is it simple enough to say that the intervals are the however many letters are between the one letter and the next?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, however many letters are. Just remember to count your lowest sounding note, whatever letter that is, as 1.
Yes.
Don't start with the next one being 1. So that'll get you one off, obviously.
Very cool. Let's talk about the second component.
Quality, major, minor, perfect, diminished, or augmented, because that's a little trickier. If the top note, and by top note I mean the highest sounding note, is in the major scale of the lowest sounding note, then that interval is either major or perfect.
Say it one more time.
I will. If the highest note is a note that is in the major scale of the lowest note,
okay,
then that interval is either major or perfect.
Got it.
I'll give you an example. I'm going to play an E, and I'm going to play C sharp. What number is between E and C sharp?
I'm going to say 6.
Right, because if E is 1, then some kind of F is going to be 2, and some kind of G is going to be 3.
So we're assuming E major.
Right, so we're assuming E major. So if E is 1, and then F sharp is 2, and then G sharp is 3, and then A is 4, and B is 5. This C sharp I just played, what's the number of that interval, Jeremy?
It's definitely a 6th.
It's a 6. We've got some kind of 6th between this E and this C sharp. So now we ask ourselves, is the highest note, C sharp, in the major scale of the lowest note, E. So is there a C sharp in the scale of E major?
In fact, there is.
In fact, there is. So this makes our sixth between E and C sharp a major sixth.
Because we're in the E major scale.
Yes. Because we are in the E major scale.
You made a funny face when I said that.
I know how much trickier it gets later.
Okay.
So that interval is major. We have intervals that if they line up in the major scale like that, we consider to be perfect, and intervals we consider to be major. The intervals that we consider to be perfect are the perfect fourth. So E to A, I'll just stay in E major here. The perfect fifth, which is E to B, and the perfect octave, which is E to the E, an octave above that. Those are perfect because of what they are. There's no such thing as a major fourth. There's no such thing as a major fifth or a major octave. We call those perfect.
So be you in a major key or a minor key, the constants will always be 1, 4, and 5.
Yes.
They'll always be perfect.
Yes, perfect. Now, let's talk about what happens if the answer to that a question is no. So I'm going to play two notes here. I'm going to play E, and I'm going to play G. So first, let's do what's easy.
Okay.
Let's discover the number between those. So from E to G, if E is 1, then some kind of F sharp, F flat, is going to be 2. And then this G is going to be 3. So our number is a third.
Easy enough?
Easy enough. Is there a G in the E major scale?
Not to my knowledge.
No. There is a G sharp in the E major scale, correct? So the answer is no. So we do not have a major interval here. What we have is something else. What we have is an interval that is 1/2 step smaller than that major interval. Instead of going from E to G sharp, we haven't made it that far. We made it to G natural. We've gone from E to G natural. So we're talking about a smaller distance. That distance, that space between those two notes, that is 1/2 step smaller a space than a major interval, is a minor interval. Confusing, isn't it?
I don't know. I mean, maybe. I can't remember what it was like. I apologize. I can't remember what it was like at a time where this was all new information to me.
And the idea is that we will eventually get to the point where we just know this stuff.
Yeah.
Where we can just spout off intervals so fast that it's not even funny. But until we get to that point, we have to sort of do the mental process. So
where were we? Minor third?
Minor third, yeah. Let's do a couple of random examples here. If I played G and I played E flat.
Okay.
Well,
shall I take a stab?
Let's take a stab. Do the number first. That's what's going to be easy.
Okay, so we got a G1, A2, B3, C4, D5, E6. So it's got to be a sixth.
Yep. So is E flat in the major scale of G major?
It is not.
It is not. So what happened?
I think that, again, we might have ourselves a minor case of minor.
Right. It's a 1/2 step smaller, right?
Yes.
It is just a little bit smaller than that major interval. It's a minor interval. So in this case, we have a minor sixth.
I love that.
Yeah, it always wants to resolve down to that perfect fifth, right? Very pretty. So we have major intervals, which are intervals that are conforming to a major scale. And then we have minor intervals, which are a 1/2 step smaller than that. A 1/2 step smaller still, meaning an interval that's a 1/2 step smaller than a minor interval, is a diminished interval. If we did, for example, I don't know, let's say B to D flat. So the number is fairly easy, right? B is 1, C is 2, D flat is 3. So we've got some kind of third here. But is D flat in the major key of B major?
the key of B. What is that? 5 sharps? No, in fact, I don't think I would expect there to be any flats in a key that I know to be a sharp key.
Yeah, indeed, you're right, because those natural notes are sharp key signatures, right? We use sharps for those key signatures, and for a key for a major key to have a flat in it is weird.
Yeah.
Is strange. Yeah, for a major key with sharps to have a flat in it, we've already done something a little weird.
Does it happen?
Oh, sure, it happens. This is a diminished interval, which is unique, but you'll certainly see it.
More so in 20th century techniques, probably.
Not really.
No?
Not really. You'd be surprised.
Cool.
You'd be surprised. So, but if our major would have been D sharp, right? That would have been the D we expected in B major.
Correct.
Our minor interval would have then been B to D natural,
Yeah.
right? But this B to D flat is in fact a diminished third. So this is a diminished interval. You'll notice that it is inharmonically equivalent to a major second.
I was going to say, sounds like a second, but it's a third. What's going on, buddy?
Right. Well, that's what it is. If we had called that D flat C sharp, we would have had a major second.
Okay.
Diminished. This is something that you run into with diminished intervals a lot. They're often inharmonic equivalents of other things, and this is a pretty obvious example. Diminished thirds are inharmonically equivalent to major seconds. If any of you out there are composers and you were ever composing for instrumentalists, a lot of them really get annoyed when you write intervals that are diminished thirds, because they will say, we spell those as major seconds because it's easier for them to read and to play.
Sure.
Yeah. So that's diminished intervals.
So I guess all that kind of beats the point home that it's still good to count the letter names between. If you're trying
absolutely.
trying to find the interval, go ahead and make sure you're counting the letters between.
Oh, absolutely. In fact, that's why I keep saying do the number first.
Yeah.
Because whether you think it's easy to read or play or necessary or not, if you have B written on your score, followed by D flat, that's a diminished third. As much as you would like to write it as C sharp, and in many cases maybe should, it's written that way as a diminished third. So you're going to need to understand that. Definitely don't assume it's a minor third. You'll end up playing the wrong note.
Yeah.
Or getting it wrong on a theory quiz. Yeah. So that is diminished intervals. Augmented intervals are one step larger than our major interval. So if I was to play F to D sharp, obviously, I won't bore you with the process. F to D is a major 6,
yes.
right? These are 6 notes up from F. D is in the key of F major, so this is a major 6. And augmented 6, F to D sharp.
Whoa.
Yeah. And again, inharmonically equivalent to a minor 7. Yeah. Because if you call that D sharp E flat, then that would be a minor 7.
I just got temporarily mind blown for a second there because I forgot that there is augmented 6th, there can be an augmented 7th.
Indeed. There can be augmented anything.
We never called him that, but there are cases where you would call it that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Yeah. Fascinating.
You guys, I might from time to time. I'm kind of relearning my college education here as we go. So there'll be times where I'm like, oh, cool. Even though it's things I should really know.
Well, these things, augmented. Seeing something written as an augmented 6 is probably less common than seeing it written as a minor 7. But all kinds of things happen. You modulate away from the key signature you started in just about every piece ever, right? In actual music. So it's important, even if you don't see it a lot, to understand the concept behind it, so that when you do see it, you're not thrown for a loop.
Be prepared.
Be prepared, indeed. Yeah. There's even such a thing as doubly diminished and doubly augmented intervals, which are, again, a half step smaller than a diminished or a half step larger than an augmented. You almost never see those. Those are extremely rare, but they do technically exist out there. Go look at some Bruckner scores. You'll see all kinds of crazy stuff. So that is major, that is minor, that is diminished, and that is augmented. And remember that perfect is kind of a special thing. Perfect unison, perfect fourth, perfect fifth, and perfect octaves exist when those numbers of intervals, 1, 4, 5, and 8, are from the major scale. When the highest note is in the major scale of the lowest note, then we just call those perfect instead of major. And it goes all the way back to the Middle Ages, when, because of their extreme consonance, those notes were considered symbols of perfection, from which everything else was less perfect. And but those are our intervals.
There's also a reason in physics, I believe, that.
Yeah, because the perfect octave exists in a 2-to-1 ratio. Those two notes, E to E, they exist in a 2-to-1 ratio. So for every 2 sound waves of the highest one, there is 1 sound wave of the lowest one. Mm-hmm. And they exist in a very perfect. Look at that, perfect kind of ratio like that. The same ratio applies for the perfect fifth. That is a 3-to-2 ratio.
A brief discussion on the Overtone series, which we can get into later on.
Right,
but
yeah.
The basis, the meat and potatoes is that within one note, say you play a C note, within that note, there are other frequencies, there's other sounds, other notes, that are fundamentals that are happening in a lower volume within the same note. And one way our theory teacher showed us, kind of explained this was, and you can try this yourself and make sure I got this right, Matt. But
okay.
I think if memory serves, what he did was, he played the C note on the piano with his foot on the damper, so the damper was up. So
exactly, yep.
All the notes would still sustain. He'd play that C note, and then he would, with his hand, reach in there and mute that note, that C note that he played. And then all of a sudden, you could hear all these other notes playing with sympathetic vibration on the piano, vibrating along with the note he initially played. And within that note, there was the octave, there was the fifth, there was the third, the major third. First off. But there's also a minor third in there, even lower in volume, even further away.
Yeah,
from the series.
the further you get up that series, the harder those notes are to hear. And we can get into the Overtone series at some point. Something else you can also do is again hold the pedal down so the damper is off. Very, very lightly depress one note. So lightly that the hammer doesn't strike the string, so you're just holding that note.
Okay.
And then hit the note that is 2 octaves below that, or an octave below that, or a perfect fifth below that, and it will strike that note. Cool. Yeah, and that note will ring out into the Or you can. Never mind. That's pretty much it.
Well, I mean, the main point being, whatever frequencies are playing in the fundamental note you play, the frequencies that are closer to that, like double the frequency or 4 times the frequencies that are based closely on that frequency are going to be the ones that resonate with it in the most harmonious fashion.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah. The point being that there are notes within every note that you play.
And that's why some notes sound more pleasing to us than other notes, because the closer they are in the Overtone series, the more pleasing or the more consonant they'll sound. The further away you get from that fundamental, that's when things start to get crazy.
Yeah. Well, some intervals. It is the distance between those two notes. It is the combination of those two notes.
Yes.
That sound consonant or dissonant. Yeah. Yeah. Well, we digressed a little bit.
We digress.
So let's do some examples. I'm just going to play 2 notes.
Do I get to be the student?
You get to be the student.
Woohoo!
And I don't even care what 2 notes I play. So
should I close my eyes?
That might help. Let's do this. I'm going to play F and I'm going to play D flat.
Okay.
So
we got F1, G2, A3, B4, C5, D6. Boom, it's a 6th.
What kind of 6?
Well, because it sounds minor to me. It sounds a little more...
Yeah, your ears can help.
Yeah. In this case, since I don't have it on notation, I have to use my ears in this case.
Right.
So yeah, that does sound like a minor 6th.
And indeed, F to D flat is a minor 6th. Or if you called it C sharp, that would be an augmented 5th. But far more common, you're going to see it as a minor 6.
Okay, so in that case, I used my ears. But let's say I was temporarily deaf that day, and someone said you can't use your ears, or put their hands over my ears and show me this example. Then I would have had to use a certain amount of deduction
Exactly.
to arrive at that. And I guess what I would have said to myself is, between the F and the D flat, well, I know there's not a D flat in the F major scale.
Mm-hmm.
I know that there is a D in the F major scale.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I would think that by flatting that D, we arrive at D flat, we arrive at the flat sixth.
Yeah, at the minor sixth.
At the minor sixth.
Which is a half step smaller than the major sixth. Very, very good.
Cool. Can we have one more?
Yeah, let's see what I can come up with here. So I'm going to play C, and I'm going to play F.
Okay. Wow. Okay. Well, that's pretty straightforward. You gave me an easy one that time.
I did give you an easy one that time.
You start with the hard ones, and then you give me the easy one.
So you end on a positive note, you know.
Hey, a major.
Walk out feeling better about yourself.
It's already working. Okay, yeah, so from C to D, that's 2. To E, that's 3. And then to F, that's 4. So we have moved 4 letter spaces.
Mm-hmm.
So we know it's a fourth.
It's a fourth.
Now, if we are in the C major scale, which is what it kind of sounded like. Although I can't say that because it was just a fourth, so it could have been in a minor scale.
Indeed, right.
It could only be the perfect fourth.
Right, because is F in the scale of C major?
Right, yes, it is.
Yes. So we are dealing with the perfect fourth here. And yeah, those perfect intervals also exist in the minor scale. You know, the major and minor scale have those intervals in common.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In that case, it wouldn't have mattered. It would be a 4 one way or the other.
It would have been a perfect fourth.
Perfect fourth one way or the other.
A perfect fourth is a perfect fourth. Is a perfect fourth. You know, remember, we're really talking about, like I said at the very beginning, we're really talking about the distance between two notes. And that distance is, the distance between those two notes represents a number of half steps, and that number of half steps is a perfect fourth. You know, it's actually 5 half steps, and 5 half steps is always going to sound like a perfect fourth, and always going to be a perfect fourth.
Right.
One other quick little thing, because this is just way too easy, so music scholars have to make this a little more confusing than it necessarily has to be. An interval that is a half step smaller than a perfect interval. It's not a minor version of a perfect interval. It is, in fact, a diminished interval.
Okay.
So there is just as there's no such thing as a major fourth, there is no such thing as a minor fourth. If that fourth falls within the major scale, meaning, like, for example, with our C to F, if our highest note F is in the major scale of our lowest note C, which in this case it is, then that is a perfect fourth. A half step lower than that is a diminished fourth, which is enharmonically equivalent to a major third. A half step larger than that would be an augmented fourth, which would be a tritone. But so we skip the minor when we're dealing with perfects. A half step smaller or larger than a perfect interval is a diminished or augmented version of that interval.
Makes sense.
Right. Yeah. So if I played you, what can I do? If I played you F sharp and I played you C natural.
Sounds devilish.
Just a bit.
Yeah, that sounds like the tritone.
Right.
Oh, I'm sorry. You didn't ask what it sounded like.
No, I didn't.
Okay.
Next time, I'm just going to give you 2 notes.
Yeah, okay,
You're
cool.
cheating.
Yeah, fair enough. Give me those notes one more time.
All right. Oh, I'm not going to play it.
You said F sharp.
I said F sharp and C natural.
Okay, well, without counting, I can tell you right now that the C is the 5th of the F.
Yeah. Again, Jeremy's showing his great experience here. After a while, you just learned this stuff.
I didn't want you guys to listen to me counting on my fingers over and over again. But yeah, no. So I know it's a 5th.
That's a 5th.
But there is something that sounds kind of uneasy about that. Not quite so perfect.
Yeah.
So I say there's an F sharp. I got a C natural. Well, I know there's a C sharp in the F sharp major scale.
Indeed, there is.
So something has happened. This has been flattened.
Mm-hmm.
So where, as we discussed earlier, flattening a perfect fourth or fifth does not make it minor. It actually makes it diminished.
Right.
So boom, diminished fifth.
Also known as the tritone, the devil's interval, all that good stuff, which was totally hated up until the 20th century, where it became totally loved.
Yeah.
So
totally loved for what came after it?
For what came after.
For what it would resolve to, or is it because it...
Oh, no, they just loved that interval. They just decided, in the 20th century, it was all about deconstructionism, breaking apart the system we'd used for centuries, and, the best way to do that while still having, the same 12 notes was just take things that we'd shunned forever and decided, hey, let's just use this, and it became much more prominent an interval. What about, let's see... What about A to C sharp?
A to C sharp?
And I'm not playing it this time.
Okay.
Your ears are too good. I want you to stretch your brain.
I got it this time. So A is 1.
A is 1.
B is 2.
B is 2.
C is 3.
Mm-hmm.
So I know C sharp is in the key of A major. Knowing that, all I need to know is the number, which I figured out. That's a third.
Uh-huh.
And so boom, you got a major third.
A major third, yeah. Very easy, isn't it?
Yeah, totally.
It's hilarious how much more you struggle when I don't play the notes.
Yeah, it took a little while.
I struggle less when somebody tells me the two notes.
And
when somebody goes, what's that? That's where I freak out,
And to prove that the struggle is real, I'm not going to edit the time it took me to think about that, as I so often do.
Yeah.
Okay, so the one thing that all of these intervals have had in common so far is that they span within one octave.
Yes.
So we can see that makes them simple intervals.
Simple intervals because they're within an octave, yeah.
What other kind of interval is there?
Well, there are compound intervals. Intervals that go beyond an octave. So if I play E to E, this is a perfect octave. The F that is right above that is going to be a minor 9. Yeah. And you can figure them out the exact same way. You can count up the notes. You'll find there's 9 notes. You'll find that F is indeed not in the key of E major. It is a half step smaller than the F sharp, which would be in the key of E major, so it is minor interval. It is a minor 9th. The same principles apply. Sometimes with these intervals, it is easier for us to think of them in terms of their simple interval counterpart. For example, ninths resemble seconds, because if that F had been dropped down an octave, and instead of playing, we dropped that highest note F an octave and went, then we'd have a minor second.
Yes.
Yeah, Jaws theme. So it is sometimes helpful for us so we don't have to count so high to think of compound intervals in terms of their simple interval counterparts. And you get their simple interval counterparts by subtracting 7.
Yeah, so...
Or adding 7 to get the compound version. So 9 minus 7 is 2. So we're talking about some kind of second that has just been expanded by having one of these notes raised above an octave or lowered an octave. The same thing will happen. And in that way, we have created a 9th. That works all the way up to the perfect 16th. And then after that, you have to subtract 14 for obvious reasons.
Who wants to go that high anyways?
I in a whole lifetime of music theory, I don't know that I've ever gone that high. It's, at some point, you just start calling them, in whatever octave, you just start thinking of them as a third, or a fourth, or a sixth, or whatever. At some point, when you're looking at a piece of music and trying to determine what chord you're talking about or whatever, you're just referring to the simple interval version, whatever it is. If you're looking at an F sharp and an A, at some point you'll just start talking about that as a minor third, and nobody will care.
Okay, so in this case we got an F sharp, which is let's take it. Let's play me middle C.
All right, let's play middle C.
And then play the C an octave above that. Now go an octave above that. Okay, so from that note right there, the highest note, if you go to the D above it, we're not going to call that What is it? A ninth plus another octave.
Yeah, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to call that a major second.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Good clarification.
Yeah. You'll see one octave up, for example, major minor ninths, major minor tenths, and things like that. You'll see that because tertiary chords do continue to stack.
Yep.
So you can have a 7th chord, which then leads to a 9th chord, which then leads to an 11th chord. So
adding thirds each time.
Adding thirds each time. So because of that principle that you run into, you need to know one octave up. You need to know 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th, 13th, 14th, 15th, and 16th. And then beyond that, I wouldn't worry a whole lot.
Thank God it stops there.
Thank God, at some point, we're just tired of math. We're musicians. We're not good at math.
We can count to 4.
We can count to 4.
So there's the simple interval and the compound interval.
Yes.
The main difference being the simple interval is within the octave, and the compound interval reaches beyond that octave.
Absolutely. And if there's any takeaway from this discussion that will help you most in understanding intervals, is that you're always talking about the space between two notes. Whatever happens, that's what you're trying to determine. And those names, minor 6, augmented 4th, whatever, is referring to the space between two notes. Keep that in mind, and you'll be doing pretty well.
Okay, so let's do a quick recap about the intervals, shall we?
Quick recap. So all intervals have two components, number and quality. For the number, you are talking about the number of notes between the lowest note and the highest note. Remember that your lowest note is always 1.
Yes.
And then count up until you reach that highest note, and that number you reach will be your number. Okay. Fairly easy. Quality is either major, minor, diminished, or augmented. If the highest note is in the major scale of the lowest note, then that note is either major or perfect. It is perfect if it is a unison, 4th, 5th, or octave.
Okay.
Anything else, a 2nd, a 3rd, a 6th, or a 7th, will be major if the highest note is in the major key of the lowest note. If not, that's when you have to do some sort of investigative work.
Okay.
If it is just a half step smaller than what that major interval would be, that is a minor interval. If it is a whole step smaller than what that major interval would be, that is a diminished interval. If it is a half step larger than what that major interval would be, that is augmented. And the one caveat to this is if we're talking about perfect intervals, half step smaller than a perfect is diminished, we don't say minor, and half step larger than a perfect interval is augmented, we don't say major.
Very good.
And then compound intervals are intervals that go above an octave. So you can use the same process to determine their number and quality, count up the notes for the number, and then whether the top note is in the major scale of the bottom note, whatever. It also might be easier to subtract 7 from that highest number and work with just the simple interval version. For example, subtract 7 from a major 10 to realize that you're talking about a major third, just a major third that's bigger than an octave, so it becomes a major 10th.
Very good.
And that's pretty much it for simple intervals. We're at a point now where we can start learning how to hear them, which is, of course, far more important.
And far more fun.
And far more fun.
And that'll be coming up in a very soon podcast.
See you soon.
For questions or comments, please email us at info@musicstudent101.com. Thanks for listening, and keep on listening to Music Student 101.